Most fantastic amount of public pressure on this, and a lot of members of Parliament have been involved. So Ben Wallace has been under a great deal of pressure. I don't know, quite honestly, whether this is justified. I mean, we don't know about the other people in the queue. There are thousands of people. The estimate is that there are about 4,000 that the British might like to get out. And because Pen Farthing has, made a lot of fuss, and there's been a lot of sympathy for him, his staff and his animals as well, he has got a lot of attention. But I think it's quite hard for us to judge, what would be the order of priority. I mean, there may be other people who have been doing jobs which have been closer to the British government, which therefore put them in rather more peril. So that, I think, would be why Ben Wallace would not necessarily want to give him priority on RAF flights.
It's a difficult juggling act, isn't it, from that point
of view?
And that
is the sort of point he was trying to make, but then there was an awful lot of backlash to that. And towards us, actually, for not challenging him more and, why weren't we, sort of shouting him down about it? But ultimately, you have to listen, don't you, to what... and you could see he was agonising over it, actually. It's interesting, isn't it? Because, we can criticise MPs, and obviously Dominic Raab is coming on in later, but he's suffered a lot of criticism, rightly so.
Yeah, well, and there's a poll just published a few days ago saying more than half of the country in the poll think he should have resigned over the fact he would not interrupt his holiday in Croatia to help in the Kabul operation. And Michael makes a very interesting point. Look, we all care about animals, but also I think a priority must be the Afghan interpreters who serve the British Army, whose lives are in great peril, as are their children's lives and their wives' lives.
I think what Ricky Gervais is, because obviously I think Ricky Gervais is known as quite an animal lover, and I think he took to Twitter yesterday, he was quite frank about it, but he said the animals are going to be held in the hold where humans can't go anyway, which I think is an important point. I would say, though, if we're prioritising getting any kind of living being through the checkpoints into the airport, I would hope that humans would be prioritised. If you can get animals in and it's not going to affect the amount of humans that can get through, then sure.
Yeah, because from Pen Farthing's point of view, he was trying to ensure the safety of his staff. He didn't want to go on his own, even though obviously he's a British passport holder.
And his wife had left.
His wife had already left. These people were at risk because of the work they did for him, and I think he was sort of trying to make that process easier, wasn't it? I mean, the issue we have today is that there is a race against time, isn't there, to be able to get these people out. We know from what happened yesterday at the G7 meeting that President Biden is not going to extend that date.
Yes.
We know it's going to take a certain number of time to be able to get our military out, to be able to get the equipment out. So actually, how much time do we have to be able to get people out? It's probably a day or two before that's it and the military have to evacuate.
According to The Guardian, it is 24 to 36 hours. I don't know whether that is true or whether it is not. But we approach a moment of extraordinary danger because the people who are guarding the airport at the moment at some point have to get onto the planes. And when they've got on the planes, there's nobody guarding the airport. It's evident why that is extraordinarily dangerous. And while the Pen Farthing thing I see is very important for a lot of people, I think it is actually in danger of being a bit of a distraction. I mean, it's a thing that we can focus on, we can identify with, but our troops are in extraordinary danger now, and this thing could end catastrophically. Let us all hope together that it does not. But let us understand the nature of the danger that is faced.
And we are trying to get hold of Pen Farthing, of course, to come on the programme, but he is obviously desperately trying to figure out how to get himself and potentially his animals, but who knows whether he'll be able to do that, but certainly his staff to the airport. So we are trying to speak to him about that. But that's... and it's interesting, isn't it, when Boris Johnson and others will say we will try until the last minute to evacuate as many people as possible. That actually fundamentally can't be true, can it? Because the last minute is perhaps midnight on August the 31st, but by that point, the troops have to be out. And so the evacuations have to stop sooner than August. August the 31st is a date, except it's not really the date for those thousands stood outside the gates of the airport.
Everything works back from the 31st of August. The Americans will be out by the 31st of August. Some people were clutching at the straw that Joe Biden had mentioned that he was getting contingency plans from the CIA to alter the arrangements.
Because the CIA have been meeting the Taliban.
My own interpretation was that those alterations might bring that date forward rather than set it back. The Taliban has made it very clear we're not going beyond the 31st of August. So if the Americans are absolutely out by the 31st of August, then there are different dates for the RAF and for and for the British, and those dates are going to be prior to the 31st of August. So I think, from the British point of view, we are getting pretty close to the end game.
To that
What's
being it. And in the
scary as
meantime...
well is things that people, like organisations like ISIS, are going to be seeking to exploit this as well. So they're kind of dealing with this on two fronts. You've got the Taliban, when it comes to the last troops kind of getting out of Afghanistan, it's not just one front that they have to consider, it's also the ISIS front they also have to consider.
Yeah.
So the things that the troops are going to have to be dealing with on the ground, even if you imagine as the plane's taking off, then there's no one on the ground to kind of protect the flight taking off. There's so many risks and hazards it's very, very worrying.
A lot of pressure from all sides. In the meantime, we've got this situation, haven't we? The Prime Minister has called for safe passage for those who want to leave after the 31st deadline. And, Andrew, he's talking about, potentially this sort of financial bargaining, that there's all this money that could be released if certain conditions are met.
Yeah, but who's going to trust a word the Taliban say? I mean, the government can promise millions, hundreds of millions, the G7 can. And by the way, I think the G7 virtual meeting yesterday was pretty much a waste of time because Joe Biden only dignified it with 7 minutes of his time. He's the most powerful person in the G7. He just turned up to pay lip service. The whole thing was a bit pointless, really. But I can't see what we can extract from the Taliban in return for money because I wouldn't trust a word they said.
And also, I mean, where are Saudi Arabia and Pakistan in all of this? I mean, we were there, we were in the country, we have an enormous responsibility. But in terms of support for the Taliban and who is perhaps funding them if we're not, and as in if the freezing of funds continues, I think the EU have said there's £1 billion that was meant to be going to Afghanistan over the next 7 years. That's now, remaining frozen. I mean, Michael, you would know this perhaps more than anybody. There are other players in this that aren't talking openly.
The policy has been a mess, not just in the last few weeks, which everyone can see. It has been a mess for 20 years. So you identify Pakistan. I mean, Pakistan has had an open door to the Taliban. One of the reasons why the Taliban have been undefeatable in Afghanistan is that they had free passage into Pakistan.
Yes.
We went into Afghanistan supposedly because of 9/11. 19 of the plotters at 9/11 were Saudi Arabians.
Saudi Arabia.
They weren't Afghanis at all. The argument was that they could have refuge from the Taliban in Afghanistan. So the United States has found, for reasons of realpolitik, of global politics, that it has to sustain relationships with Saudi Arabia and with Pakistan.
Not just America, but the UK too.
Oh, of course. No, I mean, America is the key player, that's what I mean.
Yes.
So they maintain relationships with these countries which are inconsistent and which have undermined the policy in Afghanistan.
The other worry I have, that China will step into the vacuum when America and everyone's withdrawn, and they're eyeing these huge mineral deposits in Afghanistan, which, if they get their hands on them, they'll be even more powerful as a trading nation and even more dominant.
Yes, it's always been that area of the world, and, Afghanistan, with the Soviets, be it the Americans being there, be it potentially the Chinese being there, it's always been this kind of political pawn in so many different people's games. And I just think people forget that there's humans there and people there, and the amount of history that's the Afghan history is one of tragedy, tragedy after tragedy. And
let's just take a pause for a moment, because we do have some breaking news. Michael, I know we're going to talk to you shortly about your documentary as well. We look forward to hearing about that. But we've got some breaking news concerning the Paralympics and some good news as well, because Dame Sarah Storey has won a gold medal and Crystal Lane White has won a silver medal in the women's C5 3,000-metre individual pursuit. So that is great news, an amazing way to kick off
gold,
Paralympics.
Isn't it?